We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chav Gimel. That's volume 23, the third Sicha for the Parsha is Behalosecha. In this Sicha, the Rebbe discusses the various conditions that is required for prophecy, as we find in the Rambam. In the Parsha, it talks about that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest prophet more than anybody else. We also talk about other prophecies. So the Rebbe discusses here the conditions brought down in the Rambam for prophecy, comparing it with how the Gemara says in Nedorim, and then further how to reconcile this also with other Gemaras about what the requirement exactly for prophecy is. The Rebbe will explain there is part of a requirement is as a general introduction, preparing the person to be in general a vessel and a proper vehicle and for the prophecy. And some of it is part that we need to know that this is something which Hashem does, prophesizes gives prophecy to a human being with these special qualifications. Let's see inside. We'll go step by step. Aleph. In the Rambam, Hilchos Yesoda HaTorah, in the Rambam, in the laws of the foundations of the Torah, in which it discusses the concept of prophecy. So the Rambam writes, Mi Yesoda Hadas, this is from the basis of our religion, is laid up to know Shehakel Menabeis B'nei Ha'odom, that Hashem gives prophecy to the human beings. That's part of the Jewish religion. Zog the Rambam. So the Rambam says, Ve'ein ha'nevuah cholo, prophecy does not rest, elo. So the Rambam enumerates the following. First of all, al chochem godel b'chochma. He needs to be somebody very smart in wisdom. Gibor b'midoisov, strong in his character traits, his emotions, his midos. Below yehe yitzrei misgaber olav bedover be'olam, his inclination never overpowers him. No item in the world, he's always beats his yetzer. Elohu misgaber b'daitoi, but he, with his mind, he overpowers al yitzrei tomid, always on his yetzer. He is the master who has a very wide, proper view, understanding, very much. So the Rambam seems to talk here about spiritual greatness, a chacham in wisdom, intellect, and gibor, as opposed to not strong physically. A gibor, the Rambam says, is one who is strong in his character, straight, to always do the right things, and never allow for the Yetzer Hara to beat him. After the Rambam gives this introduction, the Noch is the Rambam mefared dem Seder Punovis Hanhoga Bepoel V'chulu. And then the Rambam details the order, how the conduct of the prophecy when the actually prophecy takes place. But this is the precondition on who prophecy can rest on. So now we need to compare this to what the Gemara says. Fregon mefarshim. So the mefarshim ask in Meseches Nedorim zokt Rabbi Yochanan. In Meseches Nedorim, Rabbi Yochanan states, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashre shchinasei, that Hashem will not have his divine rest, elo al gibor ve'oshir. So first we talk about a gibor over there. First, a gibor. and then it says Ashir, somebody who is wealthy, and then it says V'chocham, also somebody who is wise, V'onov, and somebody who is humble. So we have, in addition to Gibar V'chocham, we also have Ashir V'onov in the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. And the Gemara says, "V'kulam Moshe." How do we know all these? Moshe had all this. Moshe was a gibbor. Moshe was strong. He was wealthy. He was wise, and he was humble. Kulam Moshe. Wie es wird dort abgelernt from Posuk jeden Prat in the Gemara in the Dorim, every detail of gibbor, Asher, Chochma, Onov, it's learned from a Posuk. Bis Onov until the last, the condition that it needs to be humbled, Iksiv, as the Pasuk says, and which is in our parsha, Vayish Moshe Onov Ma'oid. Moshe was very humble. So the Rebbe says, if you read the Pesukim and the statement of the Gemara, it seems to talk about literally physical strength. But from them is mashma, from the Pesukei Raya. Because from this it appears, from the psukim that are brought as evidence that this needs to be by a Navi, what took place by Moshe, as Giber and Oshir made bepashtus, that when we talk about strong and wealthy, it means literally, Moshe Rabbeinu became very rich, he got to keep the leftover from the luchas that he sampirin, but his body was strong, and assets that he was wealthy. So that's the understanding. So how come the Rambam translates that Giber means Giber b'midos, that he's in control, emotionally strong, versus simply, it seems like with physically strong, just like wealthy means physical wealth over there. So it's all physical. And besides the fact that the Rambam teaches Giber strong in his character, that he's strong in his emotional, not physically, the Rambam doesn't bring down the wealth at all, and humility. Why doesn't he mention wealth literally and humility? So there's no mention in the Rambam. The Rambam just mentions Giber. He makes it as emotionally strong. Chocham, he says, he explains, but Oshir and Onov, it doesn't even mention at all in the Rambam. How come? So the Kesef Mishnah is Masbir. So the Kesef Mishnah explains, as those was the Rambam Zog is Mitzad, Svara the Nafshi Omar. That what he's saying over here, the qualifications that you need for Nevuah, it's his own idea that Rambam is saying. He is not really counting what Rabbi Yonason said in the Gemara and Nedarim. I'm not sure. Over here it says Rabbi Yonason, and the Rebbe brings down that Cain who because of Mishnah, but Rabbi Yochanan. We quoted before Rabbi Yochanan, and over the case of Mishnah Rabbi Yonason. So perhaps there's a question exactly who said it. But anyway, it's not the Gemara, but it's his own idea. So the quoting, the Rambam here wasn't quoting the Gemara. It was his own idea. So how come the Rambam says different on his own ideas from what the Gemara said? So the Kesef Mishnah explains in his Masbir, as the Tam was the Rambam bringt nicht die Protim Hanal. What's the reason that the Rambam does not bring down the details of wealth and humility? Is val Rabbi Yonason b'mamorei ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashra shchinosei. He in the Gemara in the Dorim, when it says Hashem doesn't rest the Shechina red wegen hashros Shechina in an oifen fun kvias, he talks about the permanent resting of the divine. The Rosh is mefarish b'nedorim, as the Rosh explains in Nedorim, So there are more conditions that are necessary for the permanent set level of a Navi to always be a Navi. That's why you need all the conditions. You need to be an Oshir and you need to be a Gibber. You need an Oshir and an Onov in addition to the Chochem and the Gibber. But Aber Shaloi Bikviyas, what the Rambam is talking about, not in a permanent way, just who could have an occasional nevuah. Perhaps he can actually become a prophet. He can prophesize, even doesn't have all of them. That the Gemara brings down in the Dorim from Rabbi Yonason, Rabbi Yechanan. Gibber Oshir Chochem v'Onov. That even though you don't have all of them, that he mentions over there, he mentions 4. Gibber Oshir Chochem v'Onov. And the Rambam just mentions the Gibber and the Chacham, Gibber B'midas. But Rabbeinu Lanocha Sochel Lefarish, and our master, the Rambam, over here, was not going here to interpret Elot Nai Hanovi Lihisnabis. He just gives the condition for him to be able to prophesy. He needs to have minimally, he needs to be the Gibber and the Chacham that he mentions. Even though it's not a permanent, still, what must he meet? These 2 levels of Gibber and Chochem, Gibber in the emotions, and Chochem that the Rambam uses, that's a prerequisite, that's a requirement for any prophecy should be. That's how the Rambam reconciles the Gemara with what the Rambam says, that the Gemara requires 4 conditions, because that's talking about a permanent Navi. The Rambam is talking about anyone to have any sort of nevuah. Over there, 2 of them is sufficient, the Gibber and the Chacham. This answers seemingly is not smooth. Because Noisef Alzeh, in addition to the issue that we have, that if we should learn like the Kesef Mishnah, it turns out as the Mailis Gashmius, that the physical advantages of Gibber Begufay B'Oshir Kipshute, in the Gemara, as the Rebbe proved over there, Gibber mean physically, it's talking from the Psukim, we see that everything in the Gemara is talking about literally on the physical level, not Gibber and Midos as the Rambam cites. So the necessity for being physically strong, and being physically wealthy, they are important to the permanent resting of the Shechina or the Nevi'us, mervi the Mailis Hamidus Kiber b'Medois of Chulu. So you need them more than the advantage of being strong emotionally, because in order to even have a temporary nevuah, you say that you need to be emotionally strong, Gibber b'Midos. But then when it's coming to permanence, you need physical to be more. It would seem the other way around. The l'cheir is adrabah. It would seem on the contrary. The ruchni is the kemailis, the spiritual advantage, being a gibber emotionally, that should be a greater cause and a reason to ashros ashchina b'kvi, is to have the permanent resting of the shechina, v'gvuron ashiras begashmi, is then wealth and strength physically, which the Rambam requires that, according to the Kesef Mishnah, that's required in the Gemara for permanent resting. So it's almost paradox that it should be the other way around, that the spiritual advantage should be for the permanence, and for the temporary, the physical strength and should be the wealth, the spiritual strength, the wealth should be needed for a permanent kvias, and physical strength and ashira should be enough for the temporary that the Rambam is talking about. So besides that, the Rebbe says that we need to understand. Iskosha, it still is difficult to understand. Farvozol the Rambam reden nor wegen Hashros, Hashchinas Hanavuos Lebekvius. Why would the Rambam be talking about only about the divine prophecy resting in a non-permanent way, as the Kesef Mishnah explains? Und nicht wegen the Tnoim was seine Neutik, and not about the conditions that are necessary for Hashros Hashchina Bekvius, for resting the divine on a regular basis. Why would the Rambam only address, if that's what the Rambam means, why would he only talk about how to get the temporary resting of the Shekhinah instead of the permanent? What was the condition of Moshe Yishai Yirmiyahu? That was a continuous, a kviyas. That was the Nevi'im that are articulated in the Torah. So why would the Rambam not be talking about their requirements and talking about temporary requirements? Further, is l'chayra mer negeya. Besides the fact that this is what really is in the Torah, talks about these permanent prophets, but that is also mer negeya to mevar zan amot of kavua. It's more important to explain a permanent situation wie mevar zu sein an ein molike zach than to explain a one-time thing or the bechlala matzavaroi or a temporary situation. Why would we explain a temporary situation? Why would the Rambam be talking about? But the Rebbe says, in addition to Oid V'Iker, from Pashtus Loshna Rambam in der Halacha, from the simple language of the Rambam in this Halacha, un halachas behemshech tzir, and the halachas that follow this halacha, is mashma, it appears as a ret aleph, wegen ashros hashchina b'kvius. He is talking about the permanent rest of the shchina, wegen anovi kavua, about a set navi, and also based the halachas wegen alle suge neviim. He's talking about the laws about all categories of neviim, not just a one particular category. So therefore, the answer of the Kesef Mishnah doesn't really fit into the simple context of the Rambam. So we need to still understand why is it that the Rambam translates Gibber in a metaphorical sense, a Gibber b'midos, versus the Gemara, which says that the Navi needs to be literally strong, as understood from the proofs. And besides the fact, in the Rambam, he omits talking about the Oshir also being wealthy, and about honor, about humility, which the Gemara brings down as a requirement, and the Rambam does not bring that down. Peace. The Rebbe brings that some Meforshim answer just the opposite. Basis. Eine dumme Forschung was verrennt und verkehrt, that answer the other way around. The Rambam's view is, he holds as the halacha bleibt nicht wie Rabbi Yochanan, that the law does not remain as Rabbi Yochanan, that you need all of these requirements. The halacha is not like Rabbi Yochanan. Un as giber un oshir b'muvonim haposhut, and to be a giber, strong physically and wealthy in their literal understood way, zainen nit muchrach zu hashros hashchina, are not necessary to have the divine resting on you, the nevuah. V'haraya, the proof to that is tzvish the neviim, amongst the prophets, there were such, but nit given kein gebodim, or the ashirim, they were not strong and they weren't wealthy. This is muchach euch in Shas, and as we have the evidence also in the Gemara, as es ken sein hashros hashchina euch of them was is nitkin usher. So besides the fact was that the Nevi'im, some of them weren't wealthy, but in the Gemara it's evident that doesn't need to have hashros hashchina to be wealthy, even somebody who's not wealthy. The Gemara brings the common mekoymes them sipur. The Gemara brings down in many places this story, as es is arois abaskel min hashamayim, that a voice came out from the heavens and had gesagt and stated, Yesh kan echad sheroi shetishra olav shchina k'moshe Rabbeinu. There here amongst us is somebody fit that the shchina should rest on him, just like it did on Moshe Rabbeinu. But the generation is not worthy of this. Who is this person? They were wondering. They heard this voice. The Chachamim put their eyes on the elder Hillel, that he is the one that is meant that the Shekhinah should rest on him. Was Hillel is kiyadua given agresaroni, as it's known, Hillel was very poor. So you see that even on a poor person you can rest the Shekhinah. Es bleibt aber die Scheile bin die Gehe dem, was es bringt nicht honor. But the question still remains why the Rambam does not bring the requirement of honor, of humility. Was Adarab. On the contrary, for them, Sipur Hanal, from the above story in Gemara, bin die Gehe zu Hillel Azokin, as it relates to the elder Hillel, is mashma. It appears that those was is given the Roy Shatishra Olav Shechina, the fact that he was fit, that the divine should rest on him, is given beikar to leave Zayin Anivus. That was mainly because he was a humble person, Hilo. The Gemara Firtois, as the Gemara concludes over there, Ukshemes Amru Olav, when Hillel died, they say about him Chulu, hey, Olav Chulu, he was humble. So you see, it was the humility, what was the reason for the Shekhinah deserving that the Shekhinah to rest on him. So why does the Rambam omit this detail of humility? So it also appears in our portion, as those was the posik zokt v'ish Moshe onov ma'id v'kol ha'odom ashal pnei ha'adama. Why is the pasuk telling us that Moshe was the man who was most humble from all humans that are on the face of the earth? Is ke'ein hagadama. This is like an introduction to them, to that which follows that introduction, that Moshe was the most humble as a person, and that's why the pasuk says, "Lochein avdi Moshe." But my Moshe is not so like the other prophets. The whole basin them and who I speak to him, he's trustworthy in all my home. Speak mouth to mouth with him. He sees, it's not through riddles, and he is able to actually see the picture of Hashem. Who the Eibishter is mafli mailus anavuf Moshe Rabbeinu, in which the Eibishter speaks greatly about the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu. Seems that it follows the introduction that Moshe Rabbeinu was humble. So why would the Rambam not mention the idea of humility over here? So Mela, the Rambam doesn't think that you need to be a giber or you need to be an oshir, because he has evidence that the Nevi'im were not Gibarim and Ashirim, or Hillel was fit to be a Navi. But why not bring down also on the Anivus? Gimel. The Pashtus, what man gekent van entferen, simply we could have answered as the Tanai from none of that this condition of being humble is nichlal, that's included in them was the Rambam Zocht. The Rambam already says, Giber b'midos of strong in his character traits, that his yetzer never overpowers him in anything of his life. But Oichanove is from the Milas Hamidus. Humility is also the advantage of the midas. That is part of great strongness midas. Ukamei Kain, and likewise, we said before, the strength, physical strength for Ukamei Kain, as the inyan from Giber Bekoyach, Poshet physically, not just midas, but also strong, as it's evident from the Gemara. Bring the Rambam behemshech dvorov. The Rambam brings it down in the continuation of his words. Adam shehu memule b'chol hamidus ha'elu, one who is full with this emotion, sholim begufei, complete in body, meaning giver, meaning strong. So maybe it is included anova here, and it also has the giber b'koyach. Aber aleph afila ein mezol zogun. Even if one should say as mitcholim begufei domain the Rambam eich brias ushlemus haguf kipshute, that when the Rambam says whole in body, the Rambam actually means health and bodily wholesomeness. Literally, is dos noch nit a matzav and gibber. It still doesn't make him into a gibber. But either way, it's move on. Still not understood. So why would the Rambam just include this? Even if it does mean actually a giber, why would he be including it and hinting it in the continuation of his words? Why does he not say it very clearly in the beginning of his words? As a condition for nevu. Why didn't he say just straight out? It needs to be a giber b'koyach. Same problem we also have. You want to include it in the midos v'bald as in Gemara state onov al sanin b'fnei atzmai. Since the Gemara onov stands as a independent aspect, one of the qualifications of the Navi that Rabbi Yochanan brings down, Pavosis does the Rambam need. So how come the Rambam doesn't detail it on its own and just leaves it part of the Gibber Mimidaisa? So we still need to explain it. In Ois Dalet, the Gemara, the Rebbe will bring down and compare the Gemara in the Dorim to the Gemara that's also brought down in Shabbos and show the differences between there and here, and then explain also based on that the difference between the Rambam and the Gemaras. So the Rebbe in Ois Dalet introduces the other Gemara in Shabbos, which changes a little bit from the Gemara in the Dorim, Dalet. The Gemara Hanal vertich gebracht in Maseches Shabbos. The above Gemara is also brought down in Tractate Shabbos. Und dort wird gesagt, over there it is said, Ein hashchina shoida. The Shechina doesn't rest, Elo al chacham giber. First it says the chacham, then it says giber, then it says ve'oshir, and it says Baal Koima. So Baal Koima is not mentioned in the Dorim, and Onov is not mentioned in Shabbos. So we need to understand, as asked by the Lecha Mishnah, those was the Gemara is Moisiv Baal Koima. That the Gemara adds Baal Koima over there in Shabbos is Yesh Loimar. We can say Ados is verbunden mit an Obteich und an Obteich von Gibber. That is associated. The Gibber, part of being a Gibber, is also translated as a tall person. And the reason why we have to specify it over there in the Gemara in Shabbos is Yesh Loimar was is negei b'miyuchad dort in the sugi in Shabbos, which is something which is specially connected in that discussion in the Gemara in Shabbos. By Lesretzich wegen Goivhon shel Levim, over there it discusses the height, how tall the Levim were. So specifically, he says the Baal Koima. He says Ober Shver, but it's still difficult. Aleph Farvos is the Gemara dort mashmit onov. Why does the Gemara in Shabbos leave out honor of humility, which is brought down in the Gemara in Nedorim? Un beis, and number two is meshane dem seder legabevi Nedorim. It also changes the order, the way it appears in Nedorim. Over there, it's Giber Oshir Chocham. First Giber, then Oshir Chocham. But over there, it starts with Chocham. Onevidik mit Chocham Giber. And then it talks about the Oshir. Nochashinu Haloshen in the Gemara in Shabbos. Nochashinu Haloshen. An additional change of language. Sufficiently Tzvei Sugas between these two Gemaras in the Dorim and in Shabbos. In the Dorim state, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shechina, so Hashem will not make His present rest. When in Shabbos says Ein HaShechina Shoira, that the Shechina does not rest. What's the explanation? Yesh Loimer Habir B'Kol Zeh Hey. So we can say, what is the explanation in all this? So the Rebbe brings down from the Rambam to teaches us that it's something that a person needs to know, that Hashem makes a prophet, and also to know some of the details of how the prophet becomes. By Magdir Zayin dem Inyan HaNevuah, when the Rambam defines the idea of prophecy, Zog the Rambam in the Yud Gimel Ikrim Shaloi, in the 13 principles of the Rambam, he says, V'hu sheyeda Odom, and that is that the person should know Shezem min ha'odom, that in the category of humans, Yemotze bohem, it will be found amongst them Bali Tivim Mimidois Meulois Ma'oid, some natural people that own naturally such character traits which are very elevated, Meulois Ma'oid, Ushleimus Gedoyla, and big, wholesome. And their souls are prepared to the extent that they that they can receive a different kind, a shape of intellect that comes to them. The Rebbe in the note says it's better the girsa after it's become a surah sasechel. The achar came, seems to flow better, and later than that, after this, yidbak oisoi hasechel ha'anushi. So that human intellect that the people who are at this great level receive, they cleave b'seichel hapoyel v'netzal mimenu olav, in the intellect that works and separated from him, from Hashem on him, atzilus nichbat, a honorable separation that's separated from Hashem onto the Adam who has this milus. Those are the prophets, and that is the prophecy. That seichel hapoil that connects to the seichel anushi from the prophet, those are the neviim, and that's the prophecy. So that's what the Rambam writes in the 13 principles about prophecy. And so it also appears from the words of the Rambam in Halacha, in his Sefer Hayat. What the Rambam says, some of the basis of the religion of our beliefs is Leida Shokel Menabes Bnei Hodom, to know that Hashem prophesizes human beings. Und is gleich mamshich, and immediately he continues, wegen the protim utnai hanevua, about the details and the conditions of prophecy. And he says, Ve'ein hanevua cholo chulu, the prophecy cannot rest, etc. Who gets to be a prophet? What kind of special conditions need to be met by the person to become a prophet and prophecy? Und euch wegen die Protim, and also he continues the details, wie der Novi kommt zu Lenevua, how the Novi comes to prophecy, und darke hanevua, and the pathway of the Nevua, there is mamshich in that halacha, when he continues in that halacha, that Odom chuluk sheikonis lepardes chulu, in the ways of the Nevuah, how it takes place, that a person, when he enters into the pardes, the orchard, to the secrets of Torah, etc., and also about how prophecy in actuality, so the preparation, who he needs to be, and how you reach to Nevuah, the ways of Nevuah, and how the Nevuah takes place. So the Rambam gives us a detailed of all of these specifics, because their mainter needs tam to metair sein. What the Rambam means with this is not just to describe umedir sein the protim, and to let us know the details by Ifanim and the ways, is say that Hanavua, how the order of prophecy is. Nor bringt say als in yonim, he brings them as matters, vazeir yedia leda, to know them, to know these matter, these detail, is leda is mi the hadas. That becomes the basis of the religion, is to know these details. Which means it's not just to know that Hashem makes someone a prophet, but also to know basis of the religion, how the prophecy works. Mi yisoid hadas, the basis of the religion is nit nor zu wissen, is not just to know, as is though that inyan hanavua, that there exists the idea of prophecy, vosischal, which rests shoida bnei odom, which rests on human beings, which is gilo soida lavodom hanavim b'chlal. Hashem revealed his secrets to his servant, the prophets, in general, just to note in a general way that Hashem reveals his secrets to prophets, just generally to know that concept, but also that oich, the idea in an oifun and geder hanevua, but also the knowledge, part of the religion is to know in the ways and the definition of prophecy. Adosis parbundun mit seichel v'das hanovi, this is associated with the intellect and the knowledge of the prophet, and it is received bedaitoi, in his mind. With the Rambam is mamshir benegeyet zu neviim bechlal, as the Rambam continues, as it relates to neviim, prophets in general, the kulam kishem misnabim, and all of the prophets, when they prophesize, evreihem mizdazin, their limbs shiver, the koyach haguf koshel, and the power of the body stumbles, the eshtenuseyem is starfis, and their faculties become confused, so that the mind remains free to understand what it sees, gets rid of all other faculties, just to accept the mind, to accept that vision, and to understand what it sees, to accept it in das. Und wie bald, and since as Nevuah is a Gilui, was wird misachet mit der Metzias, das Hanovi. Prophecy is a revelation that unites with the entity, with the mind of the prophet. Biz as Yehofech ish acher, he turns into a different person. V'yovin b'daitoi, and he will understand in his mind. She'enoi k'moi shehoya, he wasn't, his mind is not as it was. Eloshenis Allah al mailas shar bnei odom hachachomim, but he has been elevated on top of the elevation of the other people who are wise. That becomes part of the Navi's mind, the Das. It unites with him. The Riber Zainen in der Yediyah. And that's why when we know Leda, Euch Negeya, the Darke HaNevuah, it's also important, and the ways of prophecy, Ba'ifum with the Rambam is Mamshech Umayrich, as the Rambam continues and prolongs, Kshikones Lepardis. And we need to know, explaining how does it work, the prophecy, the ways, the Darka Nevuah. And he explains that Kshikones Lepardis, when you entered into the orchard, the Yimshach Be'oisam Ha'inyonim Ha'gedolim Ha'rechokim, and he extensively is involved in those matters, the big and distant, and he'll have a prepared mind to understand and grasp. And he keeps on going and becoming holier, sanctifies himself, and he separates himself from the path of the general, as the people Hazman, who go and follow the darkness of the time. But he keeps on going and he keeps on encouraging himself. And he teaches himself he should have no thought from any of the words of vanity, any vanity matters, he has no thought for that. And not from the vanities of the time, and all kinds of tricks. But his mind is always free, lamaila, to be above. Kishura all this is languages of understanding, the das, the mind, to be tied under the throne to understand. In those holy, pure shapes, and he gazes at the wisdom of Hashem, all of it, Mitzura Rishoina, from the first shape, the highest levels, at Tabur Ha'oretz, until the belly button of the earth, meaning in the lowest, into the earth, V'yodeya Mehen Godly, and he knows by looking into these, from the highest to the lowest, the greatness of Hashem. Undamot, after all this, the Rambam says, Miyad, Ruach HaKodesh Shoyda Olav. Immediately, the holy Ruach, the spirit of Kedusha, rests upon him. Thus, alles is Negeya Unatel Fundami Yisoida Hadas Leda. This all that described by the Rambam is part of the foundation of the religion. We need to know all this. So based on this, that we're saying that you need to know more than just a Navi prophesies, can tell you some secrets that has from Hashem, but the way the Navi reaches through his mind, freeing himself from everything else and grasping this revelation of holiness and gets the Ruach HaKodesh. So now we can understand the condition for prophecy. Was der Rambam rechen dafke dit neuen was bringt, and the fact that the Rambam just counts these conditions that he does bring down. It doesn't bring down the other matters that the Gemara says. He doesn't bring down Gibor, which a physical Gvura we're talking about. That's what the Gemara talks about. Ashir, it doesn't mention need to be wealthy. The Rambam doesn't bring that down, which means physical, and honor and humility. So the Rebbe explains. The Rambam is nicht äußern zu reden wegen alle Tenoim, wo seine nötig zu Ashros an Nebuah. The Rambam is not intending to discuss all conditions that are necessary to get the resting of prophecy. Nor blois wegen die was men darf, only those parts that you need later to know, those that you need to know, als Yesoid Hadas, because they are the basis of our religion. Und das is, what are the principles that one needs to know as a basis of the religion is as ein ha-nevuah chola ella al chochem gadol b'chochma, that the prophecy does not rest but on a great sage, a great chochem in wisdom, and giber mimidosav, as somebody who is strong in his character, and his yetzer should not overpower him, but him with his mind always part of the yetzer. Has a very wide mind. That it's necessary to know this. Why? These are matters in the essence of the definition of prophecy. Which add understanding the basis and the principle of Nevuah. That adds in understanding the basis of Nevuah. Adosis in an Eufun was spoiled in das Odom. It's in such a way that it impacts the mind of the person. B'meile, therefore, is negeya der matzah fun das utchunas Odom. That's why the condition of the mind and the characteristic of the person, it's important when the nevuah is of imchal, when the nevuah rests on him. Mashenkin, the other in yonim, as opposed to the other details, gibir oshir v'onov, the strength, physical, wealth, physical, honor, humility, seinen blois to noyim, their merely condition was the novi darf hobun ifashros hanavu milmailo. The novi requires to have them so that it rests from above. He needs those qualities so nevu can rest of him. But the seinen obenit kin chelek von etzem inyan hanavu. They are, however, not a part of the essence of the idea of prophecy, ubemela, and therefore nit negeya in them leda for them yesoid hadas. It's not important. Then it does not connect to know about this basis of religion inyan hanavua, which is the prophecy. We only need to know those conditions that the Navi is in order to accept the Nevuah, which is part of his prophecy, but the fact that to merit and from above to get the other conditions, that's not something that we need to know. The Rebbe explains, Gvura and Ashiris, strength and wealth, bring in Arois the Shleimus Agashmis Shalodom. They bring out the physical wholesomeness of the person. Was fodert sich als Tanai zu Ashros Hashchina. That is needed as a condition for the Hashros Hashchina needs to be a physically a wholesome person. Onov, and the reason for humility is negeya. That is important. That's important to remove something that may prevent the resting of the divine. Because any person who has arrogance of spirit, then Hashem says, I and he cannot live together in the world. Und das is an inyan ki'ilu v'kfira be'ikar. That's arrogance is as if denying the main Hashem's existence. So you need the wealth and strength, wholesomeness in the physical capacity, and enough to remove any negative that would prevent and block God's resting. Zayin, according to this, we can also explain the difference between the Maimer Azal, between the saying of the sages of blessed memory, Wer bringt sich in Nedorim, as we find in the Gemara Nedorim, and Wer bringt sich in Shabbos, and the way it's brought down in Gemara Shabbos. So we should zwei in Yonim Anal, between these two of these idea, which we have on one, you have Gibber v'Oshir. Those are the physical wholesomeness, Aleph Gibber v'Oshir, and base on of humility. Chotch bechlal is another atnai, although that humility is a condition, was is merer hechrech zu hashros hashchina, which is even more necessary, important, has to be in order to get the resting of the divine vigavura and ashiras, then strength and wealth is ober bifrat echod, but in one aspect, gavura v'ashiras, strength and wealth, shaykh mer be'ofen yosher to nevuah, it is more directly connected to prophecy, which is hasharos hashchina, resting of the divine. Warum der Inyan fun Anova, this concept of humility, is a Inyan kloli. It's not associated specifically with prophecy. It's a general idea. Was on nit nor dem Inyan hanevua. That doesn't just touch the idea of prophecy. As Zolzain Hakel Menabes Bnei Hodom. In order for Hashem to prophesize the human beings, you need to be humble. No, this is negeya, but this is a general. This is important. Bechlal, in general, to the shaychus and hashro bechlal from Hakadosh Baruch Hu, to the connection and the resting in general, not only as a novi, but Hashem's presence. You need to have the character. You need to be humble, the humility. Kimefurish b'shas sham, as clearly articulated in the Gemara there. Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hashem says, Ein ani v'hu yichaylim lodur ba'olam. I and he cannot live together in the world. Forget about prophecy. We can't be in the world together. Unoch mer, and even more than this, b'l'shoin hayadua, the known language. This is used in Chassidus, in Tanya. We use the Lashon that Eina Kodesh Baruch Hu Shoyre Elal Dover Shabbat Leslie is Baruch. God does not rest but on an item which is subjugated to him less. Mash'enken Gvura Vashiris, but as opposed to. So the characteristic of Anova is not uniquely associated with prophecy, but it's necessary for the divine presence at all in any case. And cannot be existent with if there's no humility. Mashenking Gvura Vashiris, as opposed to strength and wealth, Dainin Shaykh Nor to Nevuah. They only apply to prophecy. Kishem v'inyan hanevuah foder dem tachlis hashlemus. For my lesodom, just like prophecy demands the ultimate whole completeness from the advantage of the person, as the Rambam brings down the Chocham, Godel b'Chochma Gibber Midays of Chulu, on a spiritual level, to be a great wise man and also strong in the character traits. Canal, as earlier, Fodder das Eich, these Tachlis Hashlemus, that also needs the ultimate wholesomeness in Metzius Odom Begashmis, in the person's existence physically, Guvuras Haguf and Ashiris, to be strength in the body and wealth. V'yesh lahoisif, so why take? So the Rebbe is going to explain that those are the physical characteristics actually help in the service of Hashem, as we find that having one's needs met by Hashem is basically not just to have financial and physical wealth, but that's the way they'll be able to learn Torah without distraction by having what they need. So the fact that he's healthy and he's strong and he's wealthy also serves physically that spiritual need. So we can add, this is similar, Mashakosov Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam writes in the laws of Teshuvah. Benigei to the Yehudim Gashmi Torah, when he addresses the physical promises that the Torah promises for keeping the Torah, those nitkin schar if Torah mitzvahs, that is not considered to be a reward for Torah mitzvahs. Nor but there are a benefit and a support to shleimus, that a person should be able to reach wholesomeness, the study of Torah and observance of mitzvahs. The Eibishter nemt arop, by providing all of the physical promises. The Eibishter removes kol hadvorim hamoinim meisonu, all matters that prevent us from learning Torah, mekayim zay mitzvahs, to study Torah and observing mitzvahs. When that is mashpia, and he gives us the flow of kol hatoivos hamachazikis es yedenu, all the good that support our hands, lasis as Torah. So he gives us all the good things to strengthen, support our hands to do the Torah. Going, for example, soiva, there should be plenty of food, v'sholem, and peace, v'ribu v'zov, and should be lots of gold, silver and gold, kidei, shaloi nase kol yamenu, so that we should not need to occupy all of our days, b'dvorim, shaguf tzarich lem, in matters that the body needs them, elonesha pnuyim, but we should be able to sit free, lilmed b'chochma, to study chochma, v'lasis ha-mitzvah chulan, to do the mitzvahs. So b'alderech zeh yesh leima b'negei ha'novi. So similar to this, we can say, as it relates to a prophet, as when seinen de meiles von chochem godel giber b'midas chulu, when are his advantages for being a great chochem and strong in character, when is it complete, when is it whole, is be'eser atoich de malas hagashmis from gevura v'ashiris, if he also have these physical advantages of strength and wealth, that supports the strength and the wisdom that he has on the spiritual level. So, yes. So now the Rebbe said, so now in order we can say, to answer, now we know this difference between humility and the other characters. They're not essential leda, but yet they are prerequisites that require. But how do we answer these two Gemaras? So in order to answer and straighten out the Tzvei Sugyas HaGemara, the two discussions of the Gemara in Nedorim and Shabbos, as in Masechta Shabbos, retzich wegen Nevuah b'madrega gavoya. Masechta Shabbos, it talks about prophecy on a very high level. And in Nedorim, And in the Gemara Vegna Nevuah b'madrege lamata mehanal. Nedarim, it talks on a lower level, not on the highest level of prophecy. Or we can say that he's not even talking about prophecy, but talking about the resting of the divine. And the Rebbe says, to explain this, that there is different levels. It's not one level of nevuah. There's not one level of the divine presence, because there's different levels. Ubahagdim, and by first introducing in the inyan for Shechina Shoira, in the idea that the divine rests and Faran Ribu Madregas, there are multiple levels. To start with, on the highest level comes the prophecy of Moshe, Bishlei Musa, in its wholesomeness. Bis, on the other extreme, we have a Kol Beyasora, Shchinte Sharia, you'll have the divine rest if there is 10 people. Even when they don't speak words of Torah. So there is a sense of Shechina there. Even by Moshe itself, there were many different steps and levels. Nevuas Moshe his prophecy at his most complete way, like recorded in our parsha, which says, "V'nemar the pasuk said there was never a prophet like Moshe to prove the prophecy of Moshe, which is in the highest level in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. That is Moshe Rabbeinu in its highest level. And then you had a little less. This is given Eider was this Asher Moshe, the level of Nevuah that before Moshe became wealthy, Mipsalos and Shaluchas, from the leftover of the Luchas. Was in them is Kolul Zman La'achar Shekibel Torah Misinai. Also, time after he received Torah Misinai, and still he did not become yet the level of Ashir, because that was later on when it was Psolacha. Then you had a lower level, the Lamed Ches Shonov and Eden Zayne given in Midbar, the 38 years that the Jews were in the desert. Eider was Tamo Ansha HaMilchom Elamus, before the end of the people of the age of the war, when they died before that, Hashem did not unite with Moshe, face to face. The Yishvadas, brought down in Rashi over there, and further. So that's basically, we see that there is actually lots of different levels of the Shekhinah's resting to come down. So saying that there is a difference between the Gemara in Shabbos, which talks of the highest level, and the Gemara of Nedarim, which talks on a lower level, or Ashros Ashkin in general, is euch verstandig the Shina Aloshin in the Sugya. The Sugya is the difference of languages in these Gemaras. Ein Hashchina Shoira, and Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shchina. So the Shchina does not rest, or Hashem does not make his Shchina rest. This is Yedua the Klal. It's known, the rule, as Dafka Gavoya B'Yosef is Shoir Lemat Yosef, that it's specifically that which is on a higher level rests on a very lower level. Und der Riber in Mesachas Nedorim was Retzich, in the Tractate Nedorim, we're talking about which is a lower level. Hot nit the Alamailas, he doesn't have all of the advantages as in Mesechta Shabbos, it's a lower level of prophecy. Und der Fahr is bei ihm voran nur den Inyan von einer Nevuah Pchusa Yosef. That's why he only has the idea, the concept of a lesser level of Nevuah, or the Ashros HaShekhinah B'chlal, or perhaps just the resting of the Shekhinah, not even Nevuah. Kumt the Hashra Migavoya Yosef. So that comes from a higher, because it has to go down lower. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mashra Shechinose. That's where the Lashon is there. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashra Shechinose, because it has to come from Hashem. Hashem kenim Masechta Shabbos was Retzich Wegen Nevuah. Over there, we're talking about Nevuah on a higher level. Is Ashchina Shoyda for Zich Alein. Then the Shechina comes by itself. It's not somebody making it rest, but it comes on its own. Based on this, we also understand the other changes of language in these two sugyas. In Masechta Shabbos was wegen Hashros HaNevuah. Over there, it's written about the resting of the prophecy. The far zog the Gemara, as the erste Tnai is a Zayin Achochem. First condition, it needs to be a Chochem. First comes a Chochem. Was Bechlolus. Generally, when you say Chacham, is this koidel Allah mailis sichlius. This would include all intellectual advantages and also mailis hamidus, and also all the advantages of the emotions. Because also, where does the wholesomeness in the advantages, the midas, come davon? Was sich misgaber bedaita al yitzray. The Rambam says he overpowered with his mind over the yetzer. So it all goes back to the seichel. Und darf gedemmelt, wenn Yitzra misgaba lobadover beilam, when his Yetzer never overpowers him, is by him do the shleimus for Milus Hasichlis. Then there is the advantage of the Milus, that of the intellectual Milus. But thus is Akeli to Nevuah Shoyre Kenal Barucha. That becomes the vessel for the Nevuah resting. Like we said before, you have the shleimus. That is part of what it takes to have the Nevuah resting. But Nochdem is the Gemara. That's what it says Chochem, which would include everybody. Nochdem is the Gemara Mamshir Giber va'oshiru balkoim. In Yonim Umalda, over here in the Gemara, this means actually physically also. We're talking about Gashmi. V'zaina tnoim u'protim. These are condition details. Was helpful and given to shleimus. They help and they add wholesomeness in the Maila von Chochem on the advantage of Chochem. High timer, for that reason, where dort nit der Mond onov doesn't mention humility, but this is that night kloli, that's a general condition. So Mashaychus to my person to need to be connected to Hashem, or need dafket to Hashros Nevuah, not specifically to the resting of prophecy. You need to be an onav in general. Aber in the Dorim, but in more in the Dorim, Retzich nicht wegen dit Neuyim, welche Neid seinen Neitig zu Hashros HaNevuah b'miyuchad. Over there, we're not talking about conditions necessary only for prophecy. Not oichel beikir, but mainly and also to the klolos diker Hashroah v'shaychus, the generally resting and connection for HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitabenot dolamata from Hashem with a human being over here below. Und der Fahr rechen dort die Gemara euch Onov. That's what the Gemara mentions there, Onov too. Was brings to them being humble as a Kodesh Baruch Hu shall sein, that God should rest. On him. High time, hebt dort on the Gemara nicht mit Chochem. Doesn't start with Chochem. Was is negeben Yuchat Bashros HaNevuah. Shros HaNevuah, you need Chochem. That is the first, like in the Rambam, like in the Gemara in Shabbos, but not in the Gemara in the Dorim. Yud. Api Hanal Siv Hey, based on what we explained before in Siv Hey, in the Bir, Yisoid Hadas Shebenevuah, that the foundation of the, what is the religion in prophecy, to know. But for Rambam, another question that Rambam is answered based on that we need to know in the Yisoid Hadas what the prophecy is, the drachim of the prophecy. The Sefer HaIkorim is masbir dem tam. The Sefer HaIkorim explains the reason was rechont Torah min hashamayim als iker. He says that the Torah comes from the heaven. That is a principle. Unevuah als ashoyresh mistayif imenu. And the prophecy is a root that comes from the fact that Torah is min hashemayim. While Hanavua is nitzu live them, as mentioned, Zon Wissen. Because prophecy is not in order that people should know Hadvorim ha'ishiyim hamischachim ba'olam, personal matters that take place to come renewed in the world. Or through the prophecy will be renewed, new signs or proofs on specific matter. Nor the reason of the prophecy is Kidei Shetagia Hal Yodo Hayishora Elikis Lemin Ha'odom, so that it reaches to the person. And as the Rebbe brings down the note, the word Hayishora, Yoshor, to rest upon, the direct. The Rebbe brings the Elikis Lemin Ha'odom, so that should get godliness to the human being. She Torah min hashemayim, which is Torah min hashemayim. The nevu is to bring down Torah min hashemayim. Based on this, we need to understand that Rambam Alein Zoktor, the Rambam himself says, "B'negei Novi." It says with regards to a prophet, "Im kein loma nemer b'Torah Novi okim lahem mikerev acheihem kamoicha." I will raise for the Yidden, if the Yidden want a Navi, the Eibishter is saying to Moshe, I will raise a Navi from amongst the brother like you, like Moshe. So he says, Lo lasis dasumba. He's not coming to make a religion. He's coming to instruct about the words of Torah, and to warn the people not to transgress it. Like the last one of the prophets in Malachi said about, he says, Zichru, Torah Moshe Avdi. Remember the Torah Moshe Avdi. It says, Nor, but it's also, also, if he has instructed us in optional matters, mitzvah l'shmoya, it's a mitzvah to listen to him. If you translate what it says, you'll chayv misa. Of a nitzul dem hubo, he's not coming us to tell us mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs already told to us. He's coming to warn us to keep the mitzvahs. Is farvosoter misader given in the Yud Gimel Ikrim. So how come he organized the Rambam and the 13 main principle in Pirush HaMishnayis Peri Chelek, in the chapter Chelek in Pirush HaMishnayis, as the Ikrim v'Yisoidus in Nevuos Moshe, that the principles and the foundation of Nevuah and Moshe's prophecy kommen gleich noch die erste 5 Ikrim. They come immediately after the first 5 main v'Yisoidus. Talks about Vega Mitzias Sakel, about the existence of God, Unas Roila of the, and that you have to serve, and Yisoid HaHei was the 5th Koidem, from the Yisoid HaShemini, before the so they come number 6 after the number 5, but they come before the 8th one, the 8th principle as Torah's min hashamayim, und dem Yisoid HaShishi wegen Heder HaShinu in Torah, that says that there is no change in Torah. That's 8 and 9. The Navi should come after that, because the Navi is not coming to change anything. The Rambam halt as Ali Gimel seinen Ikrim. The Rambam's view is that all 13 are main, nit kidas bal ha'ikorim, not like the ikorim that one of them is a result. Afa pikein is izei atzmon do dargis umukdom muchar. Yet in them itself, while they're all principles, there is still what comes first and later. Pihanal, the fidvor of gufa. So based on the above, according to his words, when you say that Zayin, Nevuos Moshe Rabbeinu, talking about Nevuos Moshe, you should have put them after. the foundation, after the basis of Torah. Oich. So basically, what the Rebbe is asking, that the Baal HaIkrim, he goes as far as saying that Navu is not even a Shoresh by itself. He disagrees with the Rambam that Nevuah is a principle by itself, because he says that Torah min hashamayim is the principle, and the Nevuah is a branch which the Navi tells us to keep, that the Torah is min hashamayim. Everything that the Navi does is not a new principle, is to come and achieve the person should get min hashamayim as a follow-up to the Torah min hashamayim. But the Rambam does count it as a iker. One of the 13 principles is not a mistake, but it's a principle in of itself. One of the principles, but there's also an order in the Rambam, which listing. So we have the 5 listings of the first 5. It seems like the 8th one, which talks about that the Torah is min hashamayim, and that Torah doesn't change, that should have been the 6th and the 7th, seems like, because the Rambam himself also agrees, even though he considers everything a principle, Nevi is a principle, but the Rambam also says that the main thing of a Navi that Rebbe had brought down is to encourage about Torah's Moshe, not to be Mechadish. Sometimes he also tells us Dover Rishus, and one who violates is liable for Misa, but that's not his main purpose. So why doesn't the Rambam first bring down the 8th and 9th principle, make them the 6th and the 7th, and then he should bring down about the Navi, because the Navi follows the idea that the Torah is min hashamayim and lo tiyeh muchlefes, and that's what the Navi is coming to strengthen. Further, the Rebbe says, "Was is negei in Sefer Hayad? Why is it important in the Rambam Sefer Hayad? Ados v'sokel menabes bnei ha'odam is misoide hadas, that the Hashem prophesizing human beings is part of the religion." Why is that important? The Rambam has to bring down that we have to listen to the Navi, but not to say that this is a principle in religion. Kedei zu folgen dem Navi, in order that we must listen to the Navi, is l'chayre b'lois negei vision. It's only important to know as is a mitzvah l'shmaya mimenu. It's a mitzvah to hear from him. Unatam al zeh. And the reason we need to, not because it's a major principle, is val shenemar elov tishmon. Because you got to listen to him. Atzivui chodosh proti. This is a new specific command. It's not a religion. It's not a general. It's a very specific mitzvah to listen to the Navi. But based upon what the Rebbe explained before about the different aspects of the Navi, we can explain about it these different characteristics that the Navi needs to become, his das needs to become connected to Hashem. So Vapi Anal Yuvan, der Gilui HaNevuot zu Neviim is be'oifun. The revelation of the prophecy to the Nevi'im is in such a way, as the Novi verdovuk umuchad mitten Dvar Havaya. The Novi becomes connected and united with the Dvar Hashem. Bis to the extent as the Dvar Hashem is mislabesh b'sichlom v'asagosum. The word of Hashem dresses up in their intellect and their grasp. B'mara nevuah, in the vision of prophecy. V'gam b'machshavtum v'diburam, and also in their thought, in their speech. They become one. Ruach Hashem diber bi. It's the spirit of Hashem that speaks in me. That means that he is united. Umilosoi al lishonim. The word of Hashem is on my tongue. That means that he becomes one with the Eberster. The ungedated in Rambam, as hinted and pointed out in the Rambam, and also Umavur Baruch b'Kabbalah v'Chasidus, and also explained at length in Kabbalah and Chasidus. So that level of connection of unity is something which is on the highest level of the prophecy. So the Rebbe breaks it down in three levels. There's three matters. Aleph, it's really two, but there's divided into three. Two is the union, one is a union and one is a mitzvah. But within the mitzvah, we have two also. Aleph, Torah zokt noki novi okim lahem mikerav achem kamoicha gomer kedei litzavis al divrei Torah. That's the Torah tells us about that the Eibishter will give us a navi to command on the words of Torah, to instruct us about Torah. Beis, then you have a mitzvah sasei b'fnei atzmei as mendar folger navi, that you got to listen to the navi. One thing is that the Eibishter will set up a navi to tell you, but you need to listen to him. It's one of the 630 mitzvahs. Elov tishmo, and you got to listen to him. And one who violates the words of the prophet is liable for mitzvah deshamayim. But then we have a whole other category, a principle in religion, as is miyisoida hadas. It's one of the principle, the basis of our religion. Not so much to fulfill the positive mitzvah, to listen to him, nor later. There is a principle to know that the Eibishter gives prophecy to humans, and the prophecy only rests upon Gibber and the Chochem, as the Rambam brought down. As the Eibishter werd nisgale, that the Eibishter reveals himself, Gilos Soidoi. His secret, he reveals, that is Menabes B'nei Ha'odom. He makes humans, he prophesizes them, Ba'oifun shel his achdus in them das Navi, in a way that he unites in the mind of the Navi. Mislabeshes b'sichom vasagosim, it dresses up in their intellect and their grasp. Bis to the shleimus bazer, to the extreme wholesomeness in this, is the Vos Moshe Rabbeinu. The Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy was misnabe, that was what? That he was prophesizing, he was awake and he was standing. So it was in the power of Moshe Rabbeinu, his mind, to understand the prophecy, the words, and he can stand whole there. With all the details, the Rambam is Ma'arich Bazeh, as the Rambam at length goes into this in the Hemshech HaPerek and Hilchos Yisoid HaTorah, in the continuation of the chapter in the Lo Yisoid HaTorah. Und in Iker Hazayin, in Perek Chelek, and in its seventh principle in the Perek Chelek of the 13th principle. Viz, to the extent v'nikshara daita litzur elamim, that his mind is tied to the rock of the worlds, to Hashem, and that ray never left him. And his face shined, he became holy like the angel. Move on. So now this is not about the mitzvah, this is a principle. That these bases about prophecy come and gleich behemshus to the Yisoidos v'Ikorim, why this comes as a continuation to the basis and the principles Metzias Hashem, about the existence of Hashem, and following the fifth basis, that Hashem himself is fit to worship him. And also the fact that the Rambam put into the Sefer Hayad that this is from the base of the religion. Because knowing this is negeya in Hemshech to Yediyas Metzias Hashem. This is important as a continuation. You know the existence of Hashem, und sein Gilui Soidei, and that he revealed his secret. Gilui Ulo, Gluyem Welt. That's a revelation and an open action in the world to create and have these Nevi'im. And that's why this belongs as the sixth principle, because that's a separate level that the mitzvah, that takeh, but here the Rambam is talking as a principle and as a knowledge to know, to acknowledge, because this is Leda, to acknowledge this is part of our religion, not just to listen to a Navi, or else it would have been later on. And this explains why the Rambam says Leda, as the Rebbe explained the Sikha. It's a very complex and need to do it again, but we did the best we can for the first review. This is Mesichas Chag HaShavuos Tovshin Lamed Dalet.